Man, this is some bullshit. My name is Mike J. Marin, and I am an independent horror filmmaker and action figure photographer. You know, over the years, I've collected a lot of horror figures from various movies and video games. I think I started in the 90s with the movie Maniacs from the McFarlane line. And then as time wore on, you know, it just started seeing more detailed figures like from Mezco and NECA. You know, I have a bunch of favorites that I like to shoot from some of my favorite horror movies, which I'll share with you. You know, I take good care of my stuff, always keeping them in boxes and making sure that the storage spaces are adequate, you know, because I don't like my stuff being crushed or crammed in. I've been lucky enough to have time to make films, having them debut in theaters, and, you know, winning awards for them. You know, it's a good feeling to be a recognized award-winning filmmaker. And I like what I do, you know, and especially living here in Los Angeles, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for the craft, for any kind of art, actually. Hunting for action figures is one of the good sports that I like to do out here, you know. It's always the thrill of the hunt to be out in different areas and finding stuff. And right. During the pandemic, I was pretty much at home all the time because I'm diabetic, so I have you know, I'm immunocompromised, so I stayed home most of the time. And you know, it's probably when I just started shooting a lot. Since I had all these figures, it just put my skills to work as a filmmaker and as a visionary. Just started doing a lot of figure photography, sharpened my skills, you know, and doing lighting and stuff. Especially when you're doing, you know, horror action figures, you always want to create darker moods for them. So I make sure that I sharpen my skills in lighting, because I believe that lighting always sells a picture. If you have the correct lighting, especially when you do compositing to a particular background, you always want to make sure you match that background to make it more, you know, to make everything more cohesive and make the picture jump out. You know, I like to take a lot of different angles of my figures and try to catch the ones in the right, you know, the right light and the right angle. And then work my magic in Photoshop, find good backgrounds or even create my own backgrounds. For this particular figure, I found a good background in my neighborhood in West Los Angeles and composited my figure on that background. When you talk horror, in horror movies, I think you always got to start off with the golden age of horror, from like Universal and that time, the black and white classics. And as a figure collector and photographer, I get really hyped when a company makes horror figures from that time, from that golden era of horror. Out of all the Universal monsters, I think Frankenstein is probably the most tragic because he doesn't know what he is. He's just like a machine operating under the conditions that he was quote unquote born in. He never really existed, except in other parts of life, no pun intended. And it's just like the mind of a child in a strong grown man's body and reacting to certain stimulus. And, at the end, he just ultimately has to be destroyed. I love this line of Universal monsters from Sideshow. I mean, they're detail. There's beautiful figures, like this Wolfman and Creature from the Black Lagoon, my personal favorite. And I think they're just a gift to have and to shoot. Diamond Select did this one, and I think out of the 6 to 7 inch figures of the creature that I have, this one is by far the best. And you can't have horror without Norman Bates from Psycho. The McFarlane action figure from the Movie Maniacs line is a good figure, but lacks a lot of articulation. And it's pretty much only one pose you could put it in. But still, man, it's a really good figure to have from the black and white horror era. My all-time favorite horror movie, hands down, is the 1978 John Carpenter classic Halloween. Man, I can't watch that movie enough, and still feel that, that first time watching it feeling in your gut. I love that movie, and especially the the figures that came out of it. Michael Myers has to be probably one of the most prolific and iconic killers to come out of the slasher era of horror cinema. I mean, his presence and his menace were just pure evil, and there was really no rhyme or reason as to why why he was, or even who or what he was. He's true evil incarnate. And with every good horror movie, slasher film, there's always a protagonist. And in this case is Dr. Sam Loomis, played by the legendary Donald Pleasance. Dr. Loomis was pretty much the only character to go head to head with Michael Myers and survive. Shooting him 6 times, and depending on which version you watch, shot him 11 times actually. NECA also really did a beautiful job capturing the likeness and detail of the character of Laurie Strode, played by Jamie Lee Curtis. The 2018 version that came out it's really a cool looking figure. I love how the 2018 version action figure kept some of the detail of the original 1978 version, and just the aged look of Michael Myers is just, he's timeless, but he's a little bit tarnished as well. Still unstoppable. Laurie Strode continues the fight that Dr. Loomis started, and hopefully she'll be able to complete the task. I think one of the scariest creations to come out of modern horror cinema is the alien. And just the idea behind that creature, you know, a creature that bleeds acid and, you know, has a apex predator personality, you know, hunting you down on a ship in the middle of dead space with nowhere to go. I mean, how much more terrifying can that get? And the figures that NECA produced from those movies, I mean, just talk about attention to detail. Yeah, the alien was no joke, man. I mean, out of all the movie monsters, this one has to be one of the most terrifying because it's a formidable opponent. You know, like its mere destruction in anywhere close to you will spell your demise with its acid blood. Plus, it's quick to kill, you know, doesn't think, just acts. And I think all the different versions that came out in all the movies were, each one got more terrifying because they got bigger, they got faster, you know, more cunning. In the first Alien, there was only one, but then you got its sequel Aliens when there was many, you know, and even that small group of, you know, Marines went up against them and got decimated real quick, just to show how deadly these things are, you know. It's a bad monster. NECA did a line of the human characters from the first Alien movie with Ripley and the figure of Captain Dallas. I loved recreating scenes of the film with him, put him in that atmosphere of that derelict ship. Then you got the Laurel and Hardy mechanics of the ship, the Nostromo, Dennis Parker and Brett. And when they got those figures, of course, I had to, you know, shoot them together. And then these ones were Brett in moments before he was to come face to face with the alien xenomorph. You know, out of all the slasher films that came out in the 80s, and even, you know, some in the 90s, I think none of those killers is probably more menacing and merciless and brutal as Jason Voorhees. I mean, dude's had so many memorable kills, and he's just an iconic character in horror cinema. I mean, just the mere mention of that name, Jason, you automatically think, you know, hockey mask, machete, you know. And I think as deadly as he is, you know, we love him. Us horror fans love him, you know, because he's a horror icon. Never disappoints whenever he's on screen, you know. Jason is probably one of the most indestructible killers in horror cinema history. I mean, no matter how many times they tried to stop him, you know, stab him, shoot him, hang him, drown him, he just keeps coming back. You know, it's legendary. And even the fake sauce Jason from Part 5, Roy, had his moments of showing resistance to pain. You know, carrying out his business like the old school Jason. But, you know, he keeps coming back. You know, legends never die. No matter how many times you try to put them in their place, they're always going to keep coming back. You know, NECA paid really good attention when creating the Part 7 figure right here. I mean, just the way he looked, all tattered and slimy, and, you know, zombie Jason was probably one of the scariest ones in history. And then you get the 2009 version, that, you know, when he was like 7-8 feet tall. And even that one was crazy. But the video game version too, the NES limited edition one's pretty cool. Timeless, man. No matter how many times you try to put him down, Jason's always going to come back. There have been a lot of great changes in horror, over the years. A lot of interesting characters came out of that time, starting, from when I really got into it. The era of the slasher for me started, in the 70s with the introduction of, Leatherface, Michael Myers. But then over the years, you get to see a whole menagerie of characters that were just, awe-inspiring in the, in the visceral acts they committed in the films, and the figures that that came out of those characters, just solidifies that horror is a lot of fun to shoot. When I was first introduced to full color horror in movies, I wasn't afraid of it. I loved it. I loved the movies that came out of that era when I was young, and even, till I was in my 20s. So many cool movies and characters that had a lot of heart, because back then everything was new. There were no redos and rehashes and reboots. It was just, a story idea and whatever built off of that. And a lot of the movies that came out were just, some came straight out of left field and hit you with so much force that you never forget them. I love that era of film. I wish we could have another era of film like that, but I feel that originality is kind of taking a back seat. Although there are some films that do carry an original feel to them, but I'm sorry, man, but nothing beats that era when I was younger. 70s and 80s and early parts of the 90s. That was the best time. It's almost like every weekend there was a new horror movie, a new slasher film or a new horror character being introduced, a new monster, and or another sequel. And it was just something to look forward to. Movies were fun. Horror movies were fun. In a crowded theater, everybody screaming, people talking, trying to be tough. And there we were, man, me and my brother and my friends, it's taking it all in. And now that I'm an adult, I get to get the figures of these characters that I love, and I get to photograph them and have fun with them all over again. It's really a good time to be a collector, And at the age of 50, I get to be a kid all over again. Never stopped, actually. Man, when you talk sci-fi horror, I don't think it gets any scarier than John Carpenter's The Thing. That's a movie that I can watch over and over again, and still, it still scares me because, it has that sense of isolation, like Alien. You're stuck in Antarctica on this research base with a storm coming in that's gonna, in the middle of winter, and you got this shape-shifting alien that's going from, your friend to your friend to your friend. You don't even know who's human. And earlier in the year, NECA released a Kurt Russell, R.J. McCready figure, the character he played from the movie. And I couldn't shoot that thing enough. Both versions of that figure that came out, I just went crazy with it. Kurt Russell was so badass in this movie. I mean, pretty much everything he does, especially the stuff he does with John Carpenter, he's just, creates such memorable characters. But this one, out of all the Carpenter films, this one's my favorite. R.J. McCready, the moody helicopter pilot, the loner who eventually has to step up and take charge when this shape-shifting alien comes to their research facility and he has to fight this thing in its many forms. And NECA did a really good job with this figure. And I love the detail of it. and recreating those scenes from the film. And also McFarlane did some of the creatures from the film, so to incorporate those two together and make these scenes is really, really awesome. Recreating those scenes also carries a certain nostalgia to it that made you love those films in the first place, and that's something I'm gonna hold on to, especially with these figures in my collection. When I think of the 1990s and horror movies, I was fresh out of high school. I went to Catholic high school, so there was still some kind of parental guidance in my family, but yet I always find ways to see things. And I was off the leash in the 90s and just saw more and more and more, taking it all in. And then you get to the 2000s and you get so many ideas that were just new, fresh ideas in horror. And I think that that time span, that chunk of time, especially in my life, was cool because, like I said, it kind of changed from the slasher era into more quirky, quicker shots of things. The filmmaking was different, and as a horror figure collector, it was just like right now, a lot of those figures from that era are starting to come out, and a lot of good memories attached to those figures. This era of horror was pretty cool. I mean, give us some new memorable nightmarish characters, like Pennywise, the dancing clown from Stephen King's book. And as you can see with this figure, I took certain liberties with it and gave him a firearm, which is probably one of the worst things to do. You got new slashers coming out like Ghostface from the Scream series, and also there's video game horror, survival horror, like the 1990s gave us Resident Evil. And that game was just awesome, man. I couldn't play that game enough. I loved it. I love playing it over and over and solving the puzzles and just really, and recreating the scenes is really cool. We got a remake of The Wolfman, and the figure that came out from that is pretty cool. Love shooting that. Trick or Treat gave us Sam, the little killer. And we got the Conjuring universe, and which is pretty cool, based on real stories of Ed and Lorraine Warren, and gave us characters like Annabelle. You got the Crooked Man, based on an old kid's nursery rhyme. Also, you get the Nun, which was the demon Valak. Movie wasn't very good, but the figure was cool. Then in 2018, we got a new version of Pennywise, more deadly, entertaining one. And that figure also is just fun to shoot, putting it back into its nightmarish environments, just having a lot of fun with it. Horror, man. Horror is where it's at. Keeps changing and figures keep getting better. Being a horror director, you're always thinking, what new scares, new ideas, what hasn't been done yet, what could be done. And there's no limit to imagination. I don't think inside the box a lot of the times. I like to come up with new things that people they see it and they're like, what the hell were you thinking, And my figure photography is the same way. I love to cross genres and cross characters and put different characters in the same universe, and a lot of the times I post stuff and on social media, and It tends to piss off fanboys once in a while, but you know, it just goes to show I don't have walls around my ideas, you know. What if Batman discovered something in Gotham that was killing its citizens and wasn't from this earth? Or 2 ape scouts from the planet of the apes found an alien hive in the Forbidden Zone, only to have to go in there and exterminate it before the Scourge can reach the village. Or another ape scout finds a Necronomicon. Or the Ghostbusters themselves finding a hive. Or at the Morningside Cemetery fighting the Tall Man. Or the Crooked Man in the Conjuring universe. Or the beautiful Reagan from The Exorcist. Or coming across the Liquid Devil from Prince of Darkness. But then ending up in the Overlook Hotel. How about if Doc Brown came up against the minions from Phantasm and unleashed his fury? Great Scott. Or Michael Myers and Jason teaming up against the Phantasm minions. Or a deal struck between the Tall Man and Pinhead. Or Freddy Krueger finding a nightmare box from Hellraiser. Hell, if Jason can go to space, why can't Michael Myers? Or Jack Skellington saying what's this to whatever that is. Or Jason Voorhees hunting the wrong prey. Or a scary Book of the Month club. Or Pinhead himself finding himself in the Fortress of Solitude. How about some Imperial Mountain Troopers coming across a Juggernaut from the Alien universe? His imagination doesn't have no boundaries. It ain't the Great Pumpkin, but it can always be something.
What you feel in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you feel? What you see in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you see? What you feel in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you feel? What you see in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you see? Not everyone can survive where I dwell. I've come from heaven, defeated hell. Seen things some of you can't believe. Done things out of my inner being. Some feel they don't get a choice. Some hear a voice. Some fools may rejoice. On the sins committed, never quit. Never felt any warmth in the darkness. Perfect fit is a man's dark element. And a saint who is heaven sent. Warrior, no regret. In the absence of light in the night. My senses airtight. Hands on the hot mic. I never took the pain into the mind frame. Navajo must remain calm. Cool, collected flow. Never afraid of the dark and the hard to show. What you feel in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you feel? What you see in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you see? What you feel in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you feel? What you see in the absence of light? Let me know, what do you see? Tell me now, does the darkness comfort you? Show me now how the shadow battles through. Does it feel like a power never felt? I'ma tell you that you never ever dealt with a power that takes, never gives, hates, never forgives, nor never lets live.